Ladies and gentlemen, welcome at our regular TNA study event, which we organize in conjunction with subsidiary body sessions and also conference of parties. I'm glad we have attracted with you to share experience of various stakeholders from various point of view. We'll have UNFCCC representative Sarah Trairup. She's with us sharing experience of leading the global TNA project. It will be followed by presentation of the UNFCCC done by me on the fourth synthesis report of technology needs assessment. We have also pleasure to welcome here Mr. Rajiv Garg from the Climate Technology Center Network. He will speak about experience lessons learned from TNA implementation work, followed by Mr. Thibaut Vojta from NDC Partnership. He will also look at the TNA being input to NDCs. We have two countries with us. We have an Enda Energy from Senegal, represented by Mr. Samba Fall, sharing experience of African country implementing technology needs assessment project, and Mr. Surachai Satintukarnat from Thailand. Thailand is working with us also on implementing project based on TNAs, finance with also multilateral development banks, and he would like to also discuss with you their latest achievements. We will have a Q&A session afterward. We still wait for our senior director to open the side event. So I ask you kindly for patience. If he is not with us within 1 minute, I would kindly ask Sarah Trairup to start her presentation. Hello, Daniela. Welcome. I made a short introduction.
Good afternoon. Sorry being a couple of minutes late. Well, the substance plan is still going on, so we are rushing a bit. You have already opened up the meeting, Vladimir, so I will not take much time. Definitely to welcome you to this important discussion on technology needs assessment and importance of them in linking them with NDCs, and we will hear a lot from the panel, and the importance of this is quite clear, demonstrated. The fourth report as well indicates how this has been taken up. So what we are looking for is really to have a clear understanding and also how this can be built up upon in terms of identifying technology which are important for parties to implement their NDCs in the context of the commitments they have made. So really at this point I'll stop here. I wish you good work, and I will be here with you for a while to listen to you. Thank you very much.
TNAs, where there was a big focus on the first step in the process. So that would be the technology identification and prioritization and engagement of stakeholders. There was a large focus on that coming from the so-called first generation TNAs up until 2009. So what we have developed through the global project is we have developed the methodology for the whole barrier and enabling framework conditions, assessments, and also we have developed in collaboration with the tech a new guidance for technology action plans. We have also developed a lot of other guidances that are all available. But so coming from the early stages where we had a large focus on technology identification and prioritization, we have throughout the years moved towards having a more and more emphasis on the technology action plans and lately also on concept note development. And our latest guidebook focus on, it's a financial guidebook focusing on establishing business models, financial frameworks for how to implement technologies. So whereas in the early days we focused on technology prioritization, it has moved more and more towards developing concept notes, business models, etc. So the process has evolved over the years with a larger focus on implementation. And we can see clearly that countries are also appreciating that and are using the technology action plans to a larger extent as an integral part of their NDC development, as a part of developing GCF readiness pipelines and projects, etc. So I also wanted just to share some of the challenges that we have encountered, because of course it's not all always works in the best case scenario. So what we have, what I would like to share with you here today is also that, of course, there's always a risk of the TNAs as being a standalone process, as there is with all processes in a country. That's not a secret. But we do aim and we do see a much larger integration of the TNA work, of its methodology, of the priorities into the NDC process, and we see a potential for also including it further in the development of long-term strategies, etc., as a tool for also identifying technologies that can be used for such efforts. There's always a question of the level of quality and the depth of the technology action plans. It is a case by case. It is really depending also on the capacities, on where countries are in the different steps of developing their NDCs, of their own capacity building schemes, etc. So we are at the moment working with LDCs and SITs, and it is a country-driven process, and that's also reflected on the outputs. And that is really leading me to the next point as well, the engagement of sectoral experts. As we all know, there is a limited pool of experts in a country, and particularly when we work with smaller populations like with SITs, then there are maybe not hundreds of energy industries, sectoral experts. And of course, there's also then a high competition to actually work with these experts, and they are also not always available to be involved in the TNA process. So that's also one of the challenges we face. And then we have a global project. We work with countries across, for the moment, Caribbean, Africa, the Pacific, and Asia. And they do work at different paces. So that's also a balance where we can say we do not want to punish the fast movers by waiting for the slow movers. So we always need to find a balance on how we can accommodate countries working at different pace. Then there is the need for private sector involvement. It's also a question and something we discuss very thoroughly with the countries when we start up together the process in a country. But it's also a dilemma. Do we want to include the private sector when prioritizing technologies that a country should put forward? No, we don't want the private sector to actually have a heavy involvement or influence on what a country would put forward on their technologies. But they would need to be involved at a later stage when the country has identified its technologies, and then doing their market assessments, the opportunities and the challenges, etc. So it's always also a question of when and how do we engage with the private sector. And then, of course, there's also the question of political support, which is also key for achieving what we would, together with the countries, like to see coming out of it. The opportunities for having a global approach, as we have done under the JEF-funded Global TNA project, well, it has allowed for a solid methodology development throughout the years. We started with developing barriers and enabling framework methodology guidebook to the technology action guidebook, and then we have developed gender responsive TNA guidebook, indigenous peoples, financial guide, etc. So it has really allowed that there are resources for continuously updating and developing the methodology, which I think is really key to make the TNA process, to make it still being relevant. So it's not only a methodology that was developed 10, 12, 15 years ago, but that we continuously update what is presented and of use to countries that participate. Then we have the opportunity of regional workshops, bringing countries together, having networks across countries, learning from each other and sharing experiences. We also have, and we have Samba here with us today from ENDA, who is the regional TNA center for the West Africa or Africa. And it's also been an opportunity to build up the capacity in the regional centers, who are then with the local regional expertise supporting countries that are part of the project within the region. So we have built up the capacity in the regional centers who then support countries. And we have that in Asia. We have AIT, we have University of South Pacific, we have University of Cape Town, we have ENDA in Senegal, we have UI in Jamaica, and we have also had other partners throughout the years. And then, of course, there's economies of scale in terms of reporting and project management, etc. So that's really also something that has benefited from this global approach. So I think this is my last slide, actually, trying to make a scenario, okay, how could this look if we look ahead? And how could we imagine that? And assuming that, as we have seen an increase in the budget throughout the years from 230,000 to 270,000, making an assumption, okay, let's say we have a 350,000 budget per country. How would that look in the coming years if there was such a global continuation of a TNA project? And what do we mean by that? Well, I would welcome any reflections and suggestions, but based on the feedback and experience and learning from the whole process, I think that countries express it would be useful to take part in take as a starting point their previous TNA work, but revisit their priorities, comparing it with its NDC, and going into a deep dive perhaps in selected technology action plans, focusing more on the concept development, the financial aspects, building up business models, etc., for matching it also with technology providers and with funding. So, and then lastly, of course, update the methodology and the support packages. And I could mention one of those that we are working on at the moment and that we will launch within the next few months is a guidance on the how to include aspects of how to ensure transformational change is part of actually the TNA process, from setting priorities to developing technology action plans. So I will stop here and hand it back to Vladimir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I continue with a brief presentation of the fourth synthesis report of the TNA. This is also ahead of us today. It's the agenda item it's a part of the agenda item Poznan Strategic Program, which is 13C of SPI. But let me drive you through on the contents of this report, which, as you can see, Secretariat has received Monday, SPI 5050, to prepare an updated synthesis report on TNA, including technology needs assessment and technology action plan of phase two parties to the global TNA project of just Sarah was talking about that she was managing. And this report is synthesizing TNAs of 53 non-Annex 1 countries. And you can see the timeline actually in which these reports were produced. So it's from 2009 until 2017. This project was supported by the GEF under the Poznan Strategic Program and implemented by UNEP. And actually, the methodology which was available to countries was including 3 major deliverables. One was TNA report, which mainly contains a sector or prioritized sectors in mitigation and adaptation and prioritized technologies in mitigation and adaptation. Then it includes barrier analyzing and enabling framework report and also technology action plan, which actually is a specific action plan for each prioritized technology or action plan for all prioritized technology in the same sector. And we will come, I'll show you some more detailed information on it later on. So a little bit from the overview of the report, the sector prioritized in the report were energy, in mitigation, including energy industries and transport, and in adaptation, agriculture and water. Regarding technologies, energy generation dominated in the technology needs assessment, and this is represented by several technologies producing electricity, solar, photovoltaic, hydropower, biomass, biogas, wind turbines. In adaptation, we have agriculture and water sectors prioritized in an equal way, and we went through technologies like sprinkler and drip irrigation, crop management and improvement, drought-resistant technologies. Of course, countries reporting which barriers they are facing to technology transfer, to having technology bringing benefits to their population. In mitigation, economic, financial, and technical barriers were mentioned. And in adaptation, economic, financial, policy, legal, and regulatory. Enablers to overcome this barrier was, of course, related to these barriers, and there were provision on expenditure of financial incentive, and in adaptation, increasing financial resources available, allocation national budget, creating financial schemes. That is the major barriers. I'm not saying there were not other barriers. There were, like capacity, human capacity, technical barriers, etc. But these are the major barriers. Technology action plans and project ideas, and I will elaborate what they mean really in terms of how they are prepared. They came with a total cumulative estimated budget on implementing technologies, $20.1 billion, in adaptation, $14 billion. We had slightly more adaptation technologies prioritized than mitigation. You will see that later. And on the linkages, you have to look also on the timeline. In mitigation, the linkage, the technology needs assessment was not seen as a standalone process, many reports. They link with NAMAs and NDCs. In adaptation, NAPAs previously, and now national adaptation plans. We compared also previous synthesis report with this one. It's very interesting to look at the work of the Technology Executive Committee, and they prepare together with UNEP, UDP, a guidebook to assist countries in making technology action plans. And this guidebook was prepared in 2 tranches in 2015, 2016. Later on, especially phase 2 countries have comfort to use this guidebook with very well elaborated methodology, and it resulted in more comprehensive tabs in phase 2 than in phase 1 in terms of level of detail and completeness. And under the new guidance, parties were better able to identify specific action need for successful technology implementation. Couple of graphs, they are basically highlighting the same sectors, technologies, barriers, and tabs, which I mentioned a little bit in more details. So first you see the energy supply and consumption, in what way it dominated in the energy sector. That's mitigation, followed by agriculture for energy production, in this case, waste and industry. We can look at prioritized sectors for adaptation, agriculture, forestry, land use, followed by water, industrial settlement, climate observation, human health, tourism, energy, and other. This is sectors. When we come to technology, we can break it down to solar PV, hydro, biomass, wind, lighting in general, compact fluorescent and light bulb. That's on a sort of energy efficiency, of course, not production. Improve cook stoves. When we look at agriculture technologies, we went through sprinkle and drip irrigation, crop diversification, new varieties such as climate-resistant crops. We went through conservation agriculture needs, land use planning, etc., rainwater harvesting in water sector. Then I also offer you a breakdown of water sector for your view, and records. Categories of barriers are started with economic and financial and technical, followed by policy, legal, and regulatory. But in technical, we also see the absence of standardizations in some cases. This is what is made. It's not only human technical capacities, but we also see of missing technical environment. Information and awareness, market imperfection. If we look at adaptation, economic and financial is followed by policy, legal and regulatory, missing supporting environment for implementation of adaptation technology, human skills, etc. Now, if you look at, this is quite interesting for me, we didn't have this before in TNAs, we didn't have technology action plans. This is an example of which information is in the tabs, and that's already going towards implementation. That's why we ask countries to deliver this as good as possible. That's why the tech guidance was produced. So you can see a budget on each action or activity, responsible organization or agent, target year, description of work to be done, challenges. This is not any perfect product, but this is a product already much well advanced when we want to look at concrete plans of countries, which technologies should be implemented. We can see the budget breakdown by sector for mitigation and adaptation. So you see that in mitigation, energy dominates with 94%, followed with the small shares in agriculture, transport, industry, and waste management. In adaptation, agriculture is with water sector dominates, followed by coastal zones. Some thoughts on the findings. The majority of countries reported that TNA process was coordinated by governmental ministry or agency, but we had a wider pool of stakeholders engaged. We had academia, private sector reported, NGOs, consultants, but few countries for the moment reported involving engaging stakeholders from finance community. National development priorities were mentioned by vast majority of TNA countries as a starting for the TNA projects. And as I said, they seldomly saw the TNA as a standalone process, so it's complementary to national policies, plans for mitigating GHG emission, adapting to climate change. Number of countries more and more reported linkages between TNA and NDCs. Many of them stated that when preparing and implementing NDCs, they consulted existing climate technology projects, including TNA and TAPS. And barriers and enablers in phases 2 reveal some similarities. Economic and financial, policy, legal, regulatory were most commonly identified barriers in both phases of mitigation and adaptation. This is my last slide. I also looked, because in a mandate we also followed terminal evaluation. So what is interesting on terminal evaluation of this project, which was done independently, the needs and capacity of participating country vary, which resulted in various velocities of proceeding by different countries. So mechanisms where countries can learn from each other were provided and encouraged. That's the advantage of having these countries doing the TNA at the same time, actually, by region. And it was recognized that TNA, if properly developed, has a great added value for strengthening national strategies to support countries in formulation and implementation of their NDCs and support formulation of planning and reporting documents, including to the revised NDCs. In the global project, established capacity building activities proved to be highly appreciated by countries. If the approach incorporated substantial hands-on exercise and properly addressed ways to apply the method in the local condition. And then with some exception, that it appears that involvement and commitment from private sector is challenging, because it's very important the timing at which countries engage private sector. In some cases it was a little bit too early, and then it was proved that interest of some private sector organization a little bit dropped. And then when it was too late, already sort of semi-developed report, in some sense had to be, or there were intentions to be strongly modified, and that was also not an ideal. So this is sort of like a food for thought, at which stage, and we say it's important to engage private sector, but it's important to also look from this lesson learned at which stage, and the best countries which did it, they smoothly develop it from the beginning. Guidebook on accessing international funding is available, but should be made practical guiding on how to prepare effective proposals. So country want to look more deeper. I have to also say that there is a limited time of capacity building for these countries when they're conducting TNA. So in some cases, and especially when we're now coming to LDCs and SITs, so in some cases this is also a little bit to be thought about in future. So I thank you very much. I'm here for questions, and I pass to our colleague, Mr. Rajiv Kar from CTCN.
Can you please change my slides? Good afternoon, colleagues. It's really nice to be back in this room after 2 years, and I have a same old feeling. I see so many familiar faces, so it's really good to be back. In my presentation, I would describe some of the practical aspects and some of the practical experience which we had as the Climate Technology Center and Network, CTCN, in implementing the technology need assessment projects. These technology need assessment projects means our approach, as you know, is demand-driven, and a number of countries have requested this kind of a support from us. So the first question we ask is that, why are you coming to us? How many TNAs have you already done? And as Sarah mentioned, this TNA process started in 2009, and there are countries which have done TNAs a couple of times, 3 times, and they're still looking for the technology need assessment. So the real question to us was, why? And this is what we found. Means technology is quite dynamic in nature. It keeps on changing, and the priorities of the countries keep on changing, and that's very right. And therefore, there is no kind of a cookie-cutter type of an approach which can be applied to a TNA, or this is not at least what we apply. It's not a cookie-cutter approach because each country is unique. It has different circumstances, and they come up with different options, and I'll explain to you in some of the slides, my third slide onward, on what are the different varieties and what is the uniqueness that technology need assessment is bringing out in some of the countries. And my colleagues before me have talked about linkages. Definitely, there are many linkages. There are linkages with there are linkages with the NDCs. There are linkages with the NAPs, and we try to see what these linkages are when we start attempting or when we start doing technology need assessment in the country. But more importantly, and this has been the recent trends, we have also started looking at what is the country planning document for the Green Climate Fund. What is the country planning document of multinational or multilateral development banks? Means at least in Africa, in Asia, Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank. For each country, they have country planning documents of their own, which follows a 4-year cycle. So what are the technologies which they are looking at there? Because that is going to bring in, and if you are able to observe and capture those technologies, that is going to kind of very surely ensure that these technologies which would be coming out from the TNA are implemented in the future. So these are some of the critical things which we have looked, which we have observed. Also, we have seen countries which are coming to us and they are asking for TNA support, specifically those countries who have done TNA once, twice, or thrice. What we found that they want to dive much more deeper into technology than the sector, subsector, even at a specific technology stage, what exactly are going to be the barrier removal things or what exactly they need to do to implement or introduce a new technology. So we found more maturity in the request which comes from the countries which have already done a couple of TNAs. Second, as of now, we are really implementing something like 14, 15 technology need assessments. There are 5 or 6 countries with whom we are in various stages of discussions. Most of our technology need assessment are through the GCF readiness proposals or through the GCF readiness and preparatory support program. But there are few technology need assessments which we have utilized the CTCN trust fund to implement, but these TNAs are quite small TNAs in terms of budget, means it is in the range of the budget which is usually supported by the CTCN. But for the others which are from the GCF readiness program, the budget is large so that we are able to dive much more deeper into it. And definitely it does not go without saying that CTCN CTCN is implementing one of the largest readiness proposal on the technology side of things from the GCF readiness portfolio. Next slide, please. Very quickly diving in, and I'm going to give you just 6 examples from 6 different countries and show what uniqueness is there. Means first, Ivory Coast or Côte d'Ivoire, and I know Samba would be very happy to know that this proposal was recently approved by the GCF, and we got support from ENDA initially to frame this readiness proposal. But the unique thing here is that as a part of this technology need assessment, the government is insisting on developing an inclusive climate technology innovation system. Now, this is a national system of innovation which would be established as a part of the technology need assessment, and which would basically help identify innovative technologies and how it can be implemented. The second flag from DRC, and this again came from the country. And they insisted on that we should focus on the SME sector. And even in the SME sector, what is presented in the slide is just a workshop, but actually it is not a workshop. In the SME sector, they wanted to organize this workshop, invite all the innovators, discuss different innovative technologies, pick up a couple of innovative technologies, and then they are asking us to present and prepare a kind of a concept note which can be taken up for further financing. So what is really happening is they are creating a framework of how they can keep on repeatedly doing this process. And this is part of their technology need assessment. In Georgia, they were very clear, because Georgia is one of the countries where they have done this, we are supporting them in the 4th TNA. So what they really want to do is to establish a financing mobilization strategy for climate change mitigation and adaptation sector. So they are basically trying to focus on how to mobilize the private sector finance on technologies which is going to attract the private sector as a part of the technology need assessment. Next slide, please. Kyrgyzstan. The other country is Kyrgyzstan. Although it is a new TNA country, technology need assessment was not done in Kyrgyzstan in the past. But they are looking primarily at 3 areas. First of all, how to create an incentive and a penalty mechanism to introduce policy and regulatory environment to foster cleaner technologies. They are also looking to develop a framework and a system to support import of new technologies or climate-friendly technologies from outside the countries in the Eurasian Economic Community. And then the general thing, raise the quality standards of energy efficiency and renewable energy equipment. So this is what they are focusing on. In Botswana, Botswana is a case wherein they have done the TNAs earlier. But what they really want to do is, and it is building up on the earlier project of readiness, which was implemented by GIZ, and GIZ built the capacity of their NDAs. So now what they are trying to do using the TNA process, again, establish a mechanism within that NDA so that they can keep on doing this TNA process by themselves in the future repeatedly, and also keep on identifying technology and implementing them. The last is Syria. Again, means it's a very difficult country, post-conflict countries where CTCN is working and helping them. But again, their focus is on, creating new businesses. Creating new businesses so that the private sector can take them up on specific technologies which the country is in need of. Next slide, please. So you see these are 6 countries all through the GCF, but each one had a unique example on what the approach of the country is on the TNA. Largely what I can say is most of the technology need assessment projects which we are done, and specifically if they are through the GCF readiness program, they are going to lead to development of a concept note, and also probably going further to the PPF for the concepts and projects which are identified as a part of the TAP. And this is the case for the countries which are mentioned on the slide: Cameroon, Georgia, Kyrgyz Republic, Gabon, Paraguay, DRC, and Equatorial Guinea. Next slide, please. Means the work which we are doing for the TNAs, they are still in the process of completion, and therefore some concept notes are still in the decision-making phase, but there are few which have been finalized, like in Cameroon, a concept note on use of solar PV and energy-efficient lighting system for municipalities. A financing mechanism and a demand-side response for the municipalities is being discussed. Gabon, anaerobic digestion, composting, coastal zone protection, this has been discussed. DRC, e-mobility and urban transport and modal shift in the freight transport is being discussed. So these are some of the examples wherein a concept note for the GCF and using for the GCF are being discussed. Next slide, please. Talking about TNAs and NDCs, again, few examples picking up the same countries means we see a lot of similarity, a lot of overlap between the technology need assessment and the NDCs. TNAs generally are either ingrained into the NDCs, or NDCs are being developed looking at the TNAs. And this flow is vice versa, depending on what process has happened before or after. So if the TNAs have happened before, so in the NDCs, they are taking from that TNAs. If that next phase of TNAs are happening after NDCs, then countries are adopting or putting NDCs as front and bringing out their TNAs from it. And this is very evident, like in Côte d'Ivoire, Inclusive Climate Technology Innovation System. It is in their NDCs, which was submitted in 2022. DRC on SMEs. If you look at their old NDCs, they have mentioned the priority of the SMEs. Kyrgyz Republic on climate smart agriculture technology assessment, it is there in the NDCs, and they are asking us to do again in the TNA to really identify technologies. Next slide, please. Again, in Cameroon, as priority number 1 and 2 means the projects on which we are developing concept notes, these are in their NDCs, means it exactly is mentioned in their NDCs. Gabon also, the protection, the littoral protection is also indicated in their NDCs. DRC, the public transport system, it is in the NDCs. So as I said, there's a very close kind of a communication between the NDCs and the TNAs and vice versa. So it only depends on which process happened first, and it's a kind of a cycle which keeps on happening and happening. So we have quite very positive experience on the TNA. There are a number of countries, other countries, which are requesting us to provide support on continuing the TNAs. I see Huam here. Sudan has already mentioned to us. We are working in Uzbekistan. Morocco has already asked us, and that is going beyond TNAs and help them support long-term development strategies so that their TNAs are always in a cycle. We have positive experience. We are looking forward to finish some of these TNAs and develop good concept notes which can be taken up for future funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm based in the UNFCCC office, and I've seen this center empty for most of the past 2 years. So I'm very happy to see this room full and to see some activities again here. I'm also very happy to have this opportunity to give you a presentation of the NDC partnership and how we work with TNAs. And the approach, what I'm going to tell you about is more how we look at TNAs from an NDC perspective and not the opposite as we've listened to so far. And I'm also grateful finally because I've learned a lot from the presentation so far, again, because I'm looking at things from the NDC perspective. So I will ask you to go to the first slide, please. I just would like to start with a very short introduction of what the NDC partnership is, in case some of you would not be familiar with our work. So we were established after the Paris Agreement in 2016 during COP22 in Marrakesh. And the idea is that we're mobilizing resources for our members so that they gradually transition to a well-established, sustainable NDC process that drives long-term, low-carbon and resilient planning and investments. What does it mean more concretely? And in the next slide. So we are a global coalition. We are country-driven. As you can see, we have close to 120 members, and I mean, this slide is a couple of months old, so there may be 1 or 2 flags missing. Apologies for that. But we have developing country and developed country members. We are supporting developing countries in their NDC implementation and enhancement process. We are actually involved on the ground in 80 of these countries. And these countries would send us some requests that are related to their NDCs. And with them, we are working on refining this request and establishing what we call a partnership plan, that is a matrix with a detailed action plan on the implementation of the NDC. Next slide, please. Then we share this with our partners. So this is a list of our partners. Same thing as for last slide. There may be 1 or 2 logos missing. We have around 80 members. And these come in support to the countries we're working with to accelerate the implementation of the NDCs. So this is what we're basically doing with 2 main drivers in our work. First, we are country-driven, and second, we mainstream climate into sustainable development. These are really our 2 biggest drivers. And just to let you know also that we're a team, the support unit of the NDC partnership is a team of around 70 people. We are hosted by, our main office is hosted by WRI in Washington, DC. And we also have a big office here hosted by UNFCCC and also UNOPS. And we have a steering committee, which is currently co-chaired by Jamaica and the UK. So let me now tell you, move into the topic and tell you first very roughly what we're doing with our countries on technology. I mean, I just mentioned to you that the 80 countries where we're active are sending us some requests. Altogether, we have 4,500, close to 4,500 of these requests, touching upon all types of topics. Technologies appear directly appear only 93 times, and from 25 countries. It doesn't mean that technology is not part of the other requests, but it's kind of striking. I mean, it strikes me, especially as I heard the other presentations, how little we have this coming from countries. So this may be showing a need for us to work further to better identify technology opportunities, but this is something that I have to discuss with my colleagues. Some of the findings are actually in line with what Vladimir was saying, is that mitigation is really on the top of the request when it comes to technology. And there is also a very strong focus on energy. So this is in line with what we've just seen. Now, when we're talking about TNAs, I mean, actually, before talking about TNAs, I would like to take a step back and tell you maybe a bit more about our work in terms of policy planning and how this can relate to TNA. I told you we are country-driven, so we are not a think tank type organization that would make recommendations on how to do things to countries. However, we promote approaches in terms of implementation, and these approaches, I mean, there are two very strong components of them. The first one is the whole of government approach. That is to say, engaging different ministries, different stakeholders to work on the definition of the implementation plan of an NDC. And engaging governments, but also national, but also local governments, I was about to forget. And then also wholes of society approach, which means as much as possible engaging local actors, engaging private sector approaches, private sector actors, and also engaging as much as possible women and also young people. These are very important engagements for ourselves. And other important elements in our work is, as much as possible, we're trying to align the NDC implementation plans and into the other national plans, national adaptation plans, sectoral mitigation plans, long-term strategies, obviously, and technology action plans, or more generally, TNAs. And we mainstream climate into national development plans. All this is, I believe, very important in the context of TNAs, because in that context, we can see that TNAs can support the NDCs into the outreach to local governments, to the private sector, or also to other actors. So, giving you a few concrete examples of this work that we are doing, of the request of the countries. I'm going to start with some examples that are coming from implementation work. The next slide is about enhancement, but I will start with implementation. So first one is some work that we've done with Jamaica and with support from CTCN, where we analyzed. Oh, sorry. Oh yes, that's probably much better. Sorry if you. I hope you could hear me well, despite this. So now I don't have to scream. That's good. So Jamaica, I was saying, we worked on an analysis of the existing plan and strategies in the context of the NDC, and this included TNAs and allowed for the identification of national technology priority sectors that you can see here, and then on the recommendations to implement a 3-year plan of national science, technology, and innovation. So here, really, the NDC is supporting the technology plan, which is an important effort. Then, in Nepal, the TNAs were used to work with the municipalities by establish a linkage between the NDCs and the rolling out of the technology action plans at the municipal level. And finally, in Uganda, there was some important work in the engagement of the private sector, or more generally of companies, of private and public companies in their technology efforts. So that's about implementation. Now, quickly, we worked for the past years, I mean, before COP before the COP in Glasgow, we also supported countries, 75 countries, in their NDC enhancement work. And we have, in this occasion, worked on different other technology issues. Typically, Rwanda asked us for some support to unlock their private sector investment in the NDCs, typically on project development and technology providers, and also to be able to access GCF funding and to encourage low carbon technologies to take off. Belize asked us to do an assessment of the resources, including technologies in these. And finally, Nigeria asked for some support in developing a comprehensive TNA and action plan that would aim at the categorization and prioritization of technologies. This was also supported by CTCN, by the way. So that's it about the quick examples. Now, just a few ideas, a few suggestions on how to better mainstream TNAs into NDCs. So they are listed here. The first one is to use NDCs and also obviously LTS as tools to better align different plans. So this means incorporating the TNAs and the sectoral plans and all type of national plans that are related to climate or not actually. Another important approach is to include the major elements of the TNAs in the relevant parts of the NDCs in order to identify synergies and to avoid any duplication of efforts. Then making sure that the NDC development takes into consideration the TNAs. Again, avoiding this by such duplications of efforts and work. Then, when possible, the NDCs should also include costing and the pricing of the technology needs of the country. And then finally, and here again, I'm talking from NDC development perspective. TNAs are really a great tool, I believe, to address some of these issues that some countries may be facing sometimes in order to reach out to the private sector and the local governments. So that's it. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Thibault. May I now ask Mr. Samba Fall from ENDA Africa to share his presentation with us. Please, Samba.
Thank you, Vladimir. So I'll be also a bit brief because to provide more room for discussion. But I will just share our experience as a regional center who have been there almost from right at the beginning on the TNA process. So ENDA, just for a few slides, please. ENDA have been there since 2009 in Africa, and we almost provide technical assistance from the development of guidance notes, but also helping countries to start the process and also review the process of all the deliverables that have been elaborated. So as you see here, we are now here at the moment on the TNA 4, and we are covering 3 countries, Comoros, Somalia, and Guinea-Bissau. But most of the Western African countries have been supported through this process by ENDA. But as Sarah have said, we are only alone in Africa. We are also working with IT in Asia, but also some other centers all around the world. But here you can see the main focus where we are providing support. But as we are now here in Lyon, the main thing that we are very pleased to share is some lesson learned, and we almost we are also part of this process and to really share some constraints, but how we can move forward. But in a nutshell, we are helping local experts to undertake the process, to make the analysis, but also to write all the products that are expected from this process. And it will take from the prioritization step up to now, the new additional part is developing concept note. And I think that most of the concept notes that have been elaborated by Rajiv from CTCN is a novel, new dynamic that the TNA is doing, because we don't want to after the TNA to make it as a standalone document, but rather having some concept note out of there. So yes, please. And here now, when it comes to Africa, especially from the last report that have been well done last year, you can see here all the needs in terms of financial needs, because Vladimir have talked about it. Most of the TAP that have been elaborated were able to cost the plan and how much the plan will cost, will average to make it successfully. And we can see here on adaptation and the mitigation side, we are expecting from 2.7 billion US dollar for the mitigation needs and $2.4 billion. But here, most of the needs are for the mitigation side driven by the energy sectors. And here in Africa, as we know, most of it are from agriculture and water. So I will not elaborate furthermore, but here what is very important is the capacity building needs. And really, that is something for sure the TNA process helped to develop few or some actors at the ground on the whole process. But we know that for the implementation of the TAP product, we expect more, and we think that helping subnational and expert to implement the process is key. And also the institutional arrangement, for sure, the TNA process for some extent have been able to improve the existing one. But we need, as an African, to improve our national innovation system throughout the TNA process, and also help our TNA coordinator or units or NDE to link to the other process. Not let them only work in alone, but how to help them to break the ice and work together with the DNA, with the GF focal point, so that the linkage is there. But it is something that really we need it to improve, and I think that is not only for Western Africa, but it's most of the African country. So here is, we know most of the experts who are here are in a part of this negotiation process. We know that there is all of what we are saying now is because of the technology framework of the Paris Agreement, who have stated clearly the mandate and the need for updating and implementing the TNA result. It shouldn't be only a document itself, but it should be moved to a next step, which is what we are looking for, how to implement this great decision. So, and the CTCN also is a technical arm of this convention, and I think that he's doing a very good job, but I think that the CTCN also need again to catalyze the implementation of this TNA and to move it further. So now next step. And as Rajiv has already said, but here what I would like to state here is not only, at the moment the TNAs is not looking only on the GCF windows. There are several channels. And also in this TNA 3 and 4, what is very important is we give the country itself to choose which channel is more appropriate. And it is very important because we shouldn't only ask them to go to one window. They have the sovereignty to see, based on their experience, how they want to move forward. And you can see here the Central African Republic choose the GF2 as a financing work stream or channel. So it is very important. So when we are providing technical assistance, we try to engage a very good discussion with them so that they are able to elaborate the process very faster and very efficiently. And so maybe I have not to, because all these countries have already been mentioned by Rajiv, but here what I can see also, most of the African countries need financial support for the water sectors and energy, because most of these concept nodes are mainly focused on solar water pumping system or a cook stove deployment. All these things are, I think, very familiar to most of the technology needs in Africa. And also what I mentioned here is the example of Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire is very simple because they have already their TNA right at the first phase. Now they want to establish a new system where young entrepreneur but also local solution are matured enough so that they can really attract private sectors. It is the main rationale of this national climate system innovation. And here, these are also some examples that we have done through the CTCN, but coming from the TNA result. That is very important because from the TNA result, they can just say, this technology is very important and I would like to move further. And from Mali, they were able to elaborate guidance for how to use climate services into the agricultural system. And now they are trying to deploy it at the national scale. And yeah, so in terms of recommendation, what I would like to state again is if we really want to make the case to help African countries, first we need to help our TNA units or coordinator to really to ties or to work with the other UN processes, climate processes at the national level. This is very important. And right at the beginning, but also they try to, and to ease the buy-in process, the political aspect is key to help the implementation of the TNA project. And the additional point I would like to is help our private sectors, but also some bank manager or someone, so those who are working on the private sector to develop projects. Because usually they're coming from national division ministers or banks that are more commercial, and they don't have some insight in terms of climate rationale. So the thing is that how to help them to establish a bankable project based on the TNA result. And this lead to my final notes is about how really the current GEF can help again to implement not only piloting project, but also to move further and then with some concrete project out of the TNA result. And I think that this is possible, but as a negotiator, I think that we will push again so that the GEF, which is our natural climate finance windows to provide more resources to implement TNA product. So with that, I will thank you very much and give the floor again to Vladimir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samba. And the last presentation with your Q&A session is from Mr. Surajai Satit Kunarat from Thailand, who also collaborated with us previously with having his project expand to funding with the EBRD and other institution. So he would like to update us on his TNA implementation experience merging technology and financial mechanism.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. He suggests me to use 7 and 8 to 8 minutes. I try to in brief. Good afternoon, colleagues and friends. I come from Office of National Higher Education, Science, Research and Innovation Policy Council from Thailand. On behalf of TNA coordinator and NDE Focal Point, and also Thai negotiator on technology development and transfer. Today, we would like to share our experience about how to bring the TNA results to the ground. We think we cannot separate or divide from the study from the TNA report or technology action plan TAP, and divide from technology mechanisms as Rajiv present, and also financial mechanisms. It should be linked together if we want to bring the TNA result to the ground. Thanks. In fact, we're quite lucky. We are the first round country. I think 15 countries on the first round country for the TNA. We have completed our TNA results in 2010. At that time, we have identified 4 groups, 4 sectors, including agriculture, water management sector, and also cross-cutting issues, mathematical modeling for forecasts in the future. And last but not least, for mitigation sector, we focus on energy sector. Today, I try to focus on energy sector because we want to link to the nationally determined contribution, or NDC. So in our energy sector, we have identified renewable energy technology, energy supply, and energy efficiency. And also, we have identified energy-related climate change technology. At that time, we indicated CCS, carbon capture and storage. At that time, we used just storage, not utilization now. In fact, our TNA, our NDC use our TNA in the NDC. As some speaker mentioned, I think this is a good timing when we finish our TNA, and that time the NDC will draft their plan. So our TNA has been indicated in NDC significantly in our national plan. And then we use our TNA as a priority, maybe high priority for select the project proposed to the CTCN. We have proposed 6 projects to the CTCN, and thank you for the CTCN to respond to our 6 projects under the CTCN. I don't want to go into detail. And then one of the projects of the CTCN in fact, we use energy efficiency in a building code. Thanks for Rajiv for his always support. And we extend that project to the GCF readiness program. And again, supported by the CTCN, and we slightly changed the name of this project to Enabling Readiness for Upscaling Investments in Building Energy Efficiency for Achieving NDC Goals in Thailand. Now, it's completed already and try to move forward. Again, we think now in Thailand, we should focus on we call decarbonization in industrial sector. This is a draft, this is an ongoing plan as we have done. We try to work on CCUS, carbon capture, utilization and storage, and also hydrogen or hydrogen economy. We think we should to look forward to the future. So we scheduled to set up to establish a Thailand CCUS and Hydrogen Industrial Innovation Consortium. sorry for Sarah, she don't want to manipulate by private sector, but this is after we identify TNA. But we think private sector, in particular industrial sector, could play significant role for mitigation of greenhouse gas. This is the idea for consortium. We think private sector should be the key driver. We, public sector, our governments, we should act as a facilitator because technology is almost in the private sector, and also they can invest in the infrastructure besides public sector. We try to work with many sectors, for example, for the user and public, and we will work with industry to hear the demand from them and to link to the government for funding or for policy or for mechanism or for means and so on. And then we think the financial sector is also important for us. We need to formulate a bankable project for them. And then if we could, we try to work with our global mechanisms or maybe UNFCCC Secretariat and the Clean Climate Fund and also the Climate Technology Center Network in the near future for this project also. My last slide for the way forward. I think after we finish our TNA project and after we propose our 6th project to the citizen for its support, our government pledged to the international forum about the carbon neutrality and carbon net zero. So we need our TNA should adapt, should comply with these targets also. So we should maybe I would say revise our TNA, but not go in detail because this is the time for action now. So we should to select some technology to implement, for example, CCUS. And then we also continue to increase to use renewable energy and also energy efficiency in many sectors. This is key tools to achieve the target of UNFCCC target also. And we want to explore carbon decarbonization, for example, CCUS, as I mentioned earlier. And I think we should look in the future for hydrogen economy also, because if we work on CCUS, but byproduct, we could use some product to hydrogen product, for example, in fuel cell vehicle, for example, but many application in the product or service of the hydrogen economy. And last but not least, I come from the public sector, but we think the key driver again, I would like to emphasize or echo again, private sector will be the significant driver for this activity. So private sector partnership is very important for us. So we need to work with private sector as the partnership. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Surachai. Thank you to all the speakers for a really well done presentation, very informative. I ask now our audience for the questions.
Thank you very much. Spencer Thomas from Grenada. A question, and thank you very much for this forum. I think it was a really very inspiring and instructive forum, and we're happy to be here. My question has to do with technology development. And can you give us some concrete examples where this process, the TNA process, would have facilitated technology development in developing countries, particularly movement with respect to indigenous technologies and so on? Thank you.
So thank you very much. I think that this is very important, and I think that this is the main, what I can say, barriers or something that we really need to consider for this process. And usually, what we see most of it is during the TNA process, they attempt to just grab or identify existing one or that technology that are already matured and put it into the TNA process. But what we are advocating in this, particularly in the TNA 3 and the TNA 4, is how to provide more emphasis on local solution or indigenous one. So when we are starting the TNA first stage, like identification of these TNA technologies, experts are not committed but asked to really go into the subnational or local community to identify those solutions and how those solutions can be improved at that level, or that can be marketable, or that can be even scale it out. So, and I think that is something from my understanding or from my experiences, it is still a need to help the innovation system. And I think that is key to have a successful implementation of the TNA. Otherwise, we will again have a product that is for sure consists of many technologies, but is not focusing or is not providing room for developing the solution or the technologies. And what we have proposed for the Côte d'Ivoire is a particular example. We, as the Côte d'Ivoire, have already the TNA, but they now want to move to the development process, and that's why they're asking to have this kind of national innovation system. So maybe Sarah can complete on that. But from the experience that what we see is that development technologies is something that we have to push forward and help countries to identify at the local and subnational level a solution that can be matured at the more improved level. Thank you very much. So is it okay?
Yeah, I'll stand up. And first of all, I thank the presenters for the wonderful picture they have given us in what is going on. I am Fred from Uganda. I'm a member of the advisory board and former chair of the advisory board. I coordinate technology on behalf of my country and the LDCs. So I've liked the presentations and the examples of activities taking place. But I feel right from the guideline from Vladimir, then you talk of TNA process of Sarah, then you come to the regional center manager on TNA, and then we come to NDCs. We are all talking very nice things, but there's a disconnect. Who is feeling your activities? I think Spencer just answered that. I mean, he asked, can you give us example of development, technology development? But I think it is more than that. Development. We are here to address development, technology development, transfer. This is what people want to see. Because I'll talk concretely. In the terms of agriculture and food security, we've got diseases caused by climate change. We have got shortage of food caused partly by climate change. How does our process, or how has our process here helped overcome those problems? We have water problems related to irrigation and related to availability of safe and clean water. The communities there are opening their mouths. They want to see this water. They want to use the water. How is our process here helping those people in the communities? You can undertake your technology needs assessment. And then we have the NDCs where we have pledged that we are going to do this, we are going to do this, and we are also waiting for funds from developed countries. How do we link the technology needs assessment with the NDCs? And then we say the communities are benefiting from this process. Because really, all these are very nice statements made and the activities being carried out, but there is an issue of letting this actual technology reach the communities. Can we translate? For example, we know NDCs who are pledged to do this, to do this. Can we take elements of the outcome of the technology needs assessment, integrate it in the NDCs, and show example how these are integrated using the guideline that Vladimir talked about? I think this is what we want. And as a member of the advisory board, I think this is what we want CTCN to be doing together in collaboration with the technology needs assessment process, NDCs. And I think together we can do a lot. If we get the guidelines from the secretariats, like Vladimir pointed out, we have a guideline. Why don't we put our heads together and ensure that in Uganda they have this problem of water, they have problem of energy. Biogas is easy because the resources are there. How do we help promote the use of biomass in our schools, in our institutions, in the country? This is where we can feel our impact. They will say, CTCN is working. The engagement in this negotiation is producing results. But when I go home, they'll tell me, but you people, you're wasting time, you're even causing pollution, you're flying, and there's no result on the ground. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Fred, for this very engaging intervention. And I think you're definitely right. And I wanted just to perhaps mention some of the technologies identified for Uganda to give you concrete examples. And for energy, it has actually been identified solar rooftop systems, efficient cook stoves, and biolatrines for institutions. So those are the priorities also for Uganda for the energy part. And then for the agriculture, just to mention a few examples, community irrigation systems, responsive agricultural extension, etc. So I think what you say here is really reflecting also somehow, what we see at the country level, but we are perhaps not always communicating this in the best way possible. So I think we can improve on the way we communicate how these bottom-up needs are actually reflected in the TNAs, and that then would again feed into the NDC work that we also hear that the NDC partnership is also doing in Uganda, actually taking up the priorities from the TNA project and a step further. So I think we can be better communicating on this, but yeah, it reflects well what you are saying here. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Arun Bhatta. I'm from Nepal. I work at the Ministry of Forest and Environment, and I'm currently the government delegate here in SP 56. I will talk about two things. So one of my colleagues is the NDE for the CTCN, but I am the NDA for the Adaptation Fund. So we both work together closely. So I can explain a little bit about technology and also about the Nepal's experience with the TNA. Let me tell something about technology. I think my colleagues are right that, what farmers are looking, they are looking for certain package of technology that helps to build resilience to climate impacts. So what is lacking at present is these kind of technologies are either not available or they are out of reach of the poor farmers. So what CTCN can best do is, one, they can establish a technology innovation center, maybe in each country, to help establishing technology innovation center that could identify local traditional knowledge and practices, which will be cost effective, Plus, you also need the improved technologies. So kind of, packaging of technology will really help farmers to address these problems. Also, there could be a mechanism for sharing between the countries. So again, this center can bring those messages together and disseminate to the farmers. So I think this is where CTCN should work, I think, in future. With regards to Nepal's experience with the TNA, Nepal started in 2009. Somehow we stuck in the TNA, but could finally submit in 2021. So we haven't moved forward. So there is a need to pilot some of the technologies identified, as well as we can go for implementation. I saw Nepal's name on the presentation, so it's one of the colleagues approached us for the piloting of the TNA technology through the NDC, but that was a very small budget. I think it was only 100,000. So Nepal is looking forward to engage in the further stages of the TNA. Maybe we can, I request to UNFCCC for that. Yeah, thank you.
Last two questions, please, as we have to leave very soon.
So hello, I'm Fatuma from the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And we have 17 country members from the developing countries. And what we noticed is that even with our 17 country members, we have a huge gap in terms of technology. So how this gap could be addressed and is highlighting best practices and doing knowledge exchange mission could be beneficial and could ensure success of technology TNA implementation between the countries.
Thank you. Just one or two questions. It's Mr. Brooks from Botswana. I just wanted to know, I think my friend over there asked one or two questions on the same issue that I wanted to ask here. I just wanted to know, how do you help the upcoming middle-income countries in as far as this technology program is concerned? You talked about Botswana there. I just wanted to know again, how do you monitor that indeed some of those countries that pledge in the last meeting do meet their mandate as per the request of these agreements? And again, we talked about water, and coming from Botswana, where we share borders with South Africa and partly Namibia, you will find that the natural resources like the rivers, in the South African side, they have built dams across the rivers that stop the water, and the water will only favor them. At the same time, they are using these dry rivers as boundaries. The other side is South Africa, the other side is Botswana, but what comes from the river, which is water, is only being used by the South Africans, and the Botswana doesn't benefit out of that. So this should be some of the things that we also have to look into or come up with a plan to see that countries that has to benefit from all this natural resources do benefit equally, especially as because we do generate some of this, the part of the technology comes from what is there naturally. Thank you.
Well, I can take the first part of the question with regards to how we monitor the results and the impacts of the technology-related projects which we do. So, first of all, during the phase of project implementation, we do a regular follow-up with the countries, their focal point, the NDEs, and the implementing agency or the implementing partner, and also the project proponent on a very regular basis. we approve the outputs only once it is cleared by the NDs of that country, and we keep a track of all the project activities, monitoring them in a step-by-step manner. Post-implementation, we expect the NDEs to report to us, and we follow up with the NDEs to report what are the next steps and how they are taking up the products which are delivered, and if they need any support, further support by the CTCN to undertake the next steps. But we have noticed that post-implementation, there have been some activities on a number of projects which have yet not been reported to the CTCN. We are trying to develop a kind of a framework and a mechanism on how to follow it up. But there have been some huge impacts. And there was a question on where technology development had really occurred. And there have been a number of cases wherein we had facilitated the development of indigenous technologies through the technical assistance delivered by the CTCN. And that is generally when you are working at a community level, wherein you are using an ecosystem-based management approach to support the countries. And there are some examples where a new technology has been at least identified, if not developed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody for being with us. Thank you to all speakers. We have some further ideas like drafting a collective follow-up out of this from our colleague from Kenya. And I'm really glad that this raised so many questions and thoughts, and we hope we organize another either workshop or side event on this very interesting topic. So again, thank you. It was a pleasure to have you here.
Because I have a lot of framework on how we can support countries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.